It's 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is Broadcasting House. I'm Jane Garvey. Here are the headlines. The Tory MP, Lee Anderson, says people should learn how to cook and budget properly rather than rely on food banks. I joined him at his local food club.
Yes, there is a need for food banks, but it should be for the most vulnerable members of society. You know, there are people that generally take the Michael.
Now, the cost of living crisis is really beginning to bite. The government's delayed its plan to ban buy one, get one free offers on unhealthy food and drink. It says it needs to understand the impact of that ban on consumers. And in the Commons this week, the Conservative MP for Ashfield in Nottinghamshire caused controversy with his comments about food bank use, budgeting and home cooking. It's Lee Anderson, and here's some of what he said.
I think you'll see firsthand that there's not this massive use for food banks in this country. We've got generation after generation who cannot cook properly, they can't cook a meal from scratch, they cannot budget. The challenge is there. Come, I'll offer anybody.
So on Friday, we took him up on his offer. OK, it's Friday morning, 9:10, and Broadcasting House has taken up the kind invitation of the Tory MP for Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, Lee Anderson, who invited people to pop down to one of the food banks in his constituency. Now, Mr Anderson has attracted attention this week for his comments on food banks. He did say in the Commons, we have generation after generation who cannot cook properly, they can't cook a meal from scratch, and they can't budget. Now, we should say that he is something of an outlier, even in his own party, and at least one government minister, Victoria Atkins, has made it clear that this is definitely not the view of the government. She said it was not government policy. Anyway, he invited us. We're here. Let's see how we get on. Mr Anderson, I mean, we're here this morning at your invitation, in fact. I think you were quite keen for journalists to come and have a look at what's going on. Is that because you feel that your remarks in the Commons were misinterpreted?
There might be a little bit of that. I mean, I wanted the country talking about this for a long, long time. I've done several projects here at the food bank. Cooking classes, got other MPs involved, members of the public, the volunteers. But, you know, nobody's really took much notice of it, only locally. And I think my comments in the Commons a few days ago has really gripped the attention of the nation, if you like. And I've got what I wanted. The country are actually talking about it.
You've got attention, and it put people's backs up as well, didn't it? Because the implication is that people are irresponsible. They haven't bothered to learn to cook. They don't know how. They don't care to learn. And they can't manage their household budget. I mean,
see, that's not the implication.
Okay, well, you tell me.
No, well, see, that's what the BBC, the mainstream media, and everybody in the press would like to believe. That's the message they're portraying. You've seen the shocking headlines in the Daily Mirror. You've seen some of the rubbish you lot have been putting out.
You lot? Yeah,
the BBC have been putting out over the past few days. The mainstream media in general. Look, this community food bank here is part of the community, something I support, something I personally donate money to out of my own pocket. No, listen.
Well, I'd just like to know how.
I deliver meals from this food bank, so yeah. I'm having no press come here dictating to me, telling me that I'm delivering targeting
Mr Anderson, I just was going to ask you how much you donate.
Well, the last amount I donated was £1,000.
Right, well, that's...
So I got paid any extra income I get from work for writing articles, whatever. I've said I will donate money to this food bank, and I will do, and I deliver food for this food bank, you know, and support this food bank. This is not about me attacking poor people. This is about me helping the most vulnerable members of our society. Now, you lot in the media, you think it's a good idea to come and attack me, and I think I'm doing something good. You know, there's nothing wrong with helping people budget and learn how to cook, and hopefully have a few quid in their pockets at the end of each month. And if I was no good, if I was that nasty Tory that you keep portraying out there...
Hang on, I've only just arrived,
well,
Mr Anderson.
No, if I was that nasty Tory, do you think these people at the food bank would have me through their doors?
Do you really feel then that actually a lot of people out there who are not fans of politicians on the whole actually believe what you believe?
Yes,
and that
100%.
Right.
Well, my inbox is full. It's absolutely jammed with people saying to me, thank you. You're actually saying what most people in this country are thinking at this moment. Yes, there is a need for food banks, but it should be for the most vulnerable members of society. You know, there are people that generally take the Michael out of food banks. We know.
Who does that?
Well, I've got my assistant here. She used to be a community champion for a big supermarket who delivered food to supermarkets, and that's one of the reasons I bought her here today. There's people turning up in new cars picking stuff up. You know, you lot might not believe that, but that's because you never go to one. I do visit food banks, and I'm embedded in this community, so I want to make sure that the food banks are there for the most vulnerable members of our society. And there are some vulnerable members of people who have got no money, people that really struggle, and people that really need our help.
Right, well, we've moved on. After the interview, Mr. Anderson very kindly offered us a lift to the New Cross Community Church Hall, and that is where the Let's All Eat courses are run. And in fact, there's one actually on the go at the moment.
Well, we've done 6 courses. Yeah, so it was...
Can you just give us your full name?
It's Karen Draycott,
And what's your title?
catering tutor.
Mr. Anderson is he's been very vigorous, I would say, in his defence of his comments in the Commons. He really feels that what he's saying is an uncomfortable truth. What do you think about it?
I can give you a few examples. One of my learners, and it was a gentleman actually, spent £30 in 2 weeks just on pizzas, and he was in on Wednesday. We actually made fresh pizza on Wednesday.
For how much?
I think, well, for less than £2, but that would have made, in ingredients, that would have made more than one pizza. When he actually ate the pizza, he says, I'll never buy pizza again. Yes, I can't believe how simple it was to make the pizza. We've had people come and say they can cook, but I've got to really, some of the people don't know how to cook.
Well, lots of us don't know how to cook. I mean, it's not something that's necessarily linked with those people who are on low incomes, is it?
Cooking is a life skill. You can't survive without cooking food, can you? It is a life skill. And that's what ATTFE is all about, upskilling people. It's lifelong learning.
Do you mind just telling me your name, please?
Claire Smith.
Claire, how long have you been coming, doing the course?
I've only just actually started.
And do you agree with the idea that there are some people in Britain, perhaps around here, who can't manage their budgets as well as they should or could?
I do know actually how hard that is, trying to manage a budget, because I do it myself.
And in terms of disposable income every week?
Well, my benefits don't really stretch. So I have to try and learn how to make meals out of what I've got.
So those people, and Mr. Anderson has said this week what he believes to be the truth, that too many people are using food banks.
But I'm doing like a 2-hour job every day. But my wages don't actually stretch to help me. So I have to rely on my benefits as well to try and cover the bills, buy the food. So, and it just don't work out very much sometimes. I have to pay all the bills on top of whatever, and the budget's just out the window.
Is it nothing left over at the end of a week?
Never, not for luxuries, no.
Well, that was Claire, who is enjoying her cookery classes and told me she was keen to do much more home cooking. She also told me she did not herself use food banks. Now, we talked to Martin Lewis, the personal finance expert. He gave me his reaction to what MP Lee Anderson had said.
I've been talking about this for the last 20 years. I think the way it was done was perhaps a little bit trite, but there is a big fundamental difference between me and MPs, especially members of the government party. We do not have the political levers to put people who are in desperate times, and we do not have the levers to be able to rescue them from that. The people who do have the levers, if they come out and say these relatively small, trite, even if correct pieces of information, then it runs the risk, and it doesn't just run the risk, it is actually comes across as incredibly patronising and rather careless. Now, There is something to be said for saying, we understand these are difficult times, we need to help people, and we also want to try and educate people so they're better equipped to help themselves. And I support that stance. But you have to be very careful how you do it. Otherwise, what you come across as saying, this is your fault because you don't have the skills. It's nothing to do with us. When right now, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people's cases. And that's why coming across with rather what can be trite solutions when you have the political levers to make a seismic change doesn't necessarily go across well.
Right. Mr. Anderson, I think, would make the point that he lives in his constituency. He knows it well. He's born and bred in Nottinghamshire, son of a miner, mum worked in a factory. These are his people. He feels entirely within his rights to express opinions he knows might well be unpopular. You seem to be saying, Martin, that it's not what he's saying, it's the timing of what he's saying that's the problem.
Well, no, first of all, he's totally within his right. He's an elected member of parliament, and it's his right to say exactly what he wants to say. But it's also equally the public's and the media and many other people's right to react to that as we feel fit. Let's not try and under-exaggerate what's going on here. The problem is it comes across as him saying the cost of living crisis is down to people not being able to cook or not being able to budget. Now, I fundamentally disagree with that. You know, I have campaigned for years for financial education in schools. I paid personally, because the state wouldn't, for 360,000 financial education textbooks to be written and distributed to schools, to have to every single state school in the country, to have teacher education classes. If anybody understands how important financial education and enhancing financial capability is, I would say I'm one of those people. But equally, I believe we are in a catastrophic situation where there is not enough help and political intervention is needed right now. And just telling people to cook better and telling people to budget better is not a panacea. It will certainly help people and it should be done. Although I do note it is not the government who put the resources into schools to do it. I was asked to do it when I went lobbying them for financial education to get it on the curriculum. And now we come to a point where we are amid a crisis, and absolutely there are people whose incomes are not high enough. And telling people to cook and budget is not enough. And if you use that as your excuse for not helping people, and I'm not saying he's done that, but it does come across to an extent that that's his solution. I hope he has care and compassion to say, we have to put more other solutions in place. But if you don't, and you just say, actually, this is people's fault because they don't budget well enough and they don't cook well enough, then I think that comes across as a very difficult message.
In the short term then, here and now, what do you think the government should do? Put
more cash in people's pockets at the lowest income.
So just raise benefits, as simple as that.
So it's not necessarily by increasing benefits. There are many other ways you could do it. A social tariff that has a much more restrictive price cap for people who fall into target groups, improving the warm home discount. There are lots of ways to do it, but it all boils down to one way or the other. You need to put some more money in people's pockets. What I hear from government, and I'm not in government, so I don't know, I might be wrong, is let's come up with clever, no-cost ideas to help the cost of living. Well, that is tweaking the nipples of the problem, but it needs a lot more than tweaked nipples.
That is the ever-passionate personal finance expert Martin Lewis talking to me a little bit earlier. Let's dig into this morning's papers then. This morning, in the company of the political correspondent for Yahoo News, difficult to say, at least for me, Nadine Batchelor-Hunt. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Also with us from the Financial Times, Sebastian Payne.
Good morning.
Thank you, Sebastian. Right on cue-ish. And to Liverpool, we've got the screenwriter and author Frank Cottrell-Boyce. Good morning to you, Frank.
Hi there.
And a Liverpool fan, so reasonable spirits this morning?
Reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, good. Glad to hear it. OK, now, I know you're keen, Nadine, to talk about the cost of living crisis and particularly food banks. What have you got from the papers?
So obviously the Lee Anderson story is dominating a lot on the food bank stuff. With respect to the comments he made in the House of Commons, he suggested there wasn't a great need for food banks and that there's an intergenerational problem when it comes to things like cooking. You only need to look at the statistics on food banks to see how much they've skyrocketed in recent years.
Yeah, what are they saying in the papers today?
So Lee Anderson's saying, I won't apologise, trying to help. And there's also a story in the Sunday Express talking about food banks in crisis as donations fall because people have less money to be able to provide money for these food banks. If you look at the kind of proliferation of food banks since around 2010, it was around 40,000 food parcels were given out by the Trussell Trust. We're now surpassing 2 million. So the intergenerational claim that, years over years, certain families don't know how to cook really doesn't hold water. And again, the need for food banks and how much it's skyrocketed in the last 12 years also doesn't hold water if you're suggesting saying that there isn't a great need for them. Obviously, the reality on the ground is different. And I talk to food banks regularly, and they have never said people can't cook.
Right. Any more specific headlines around this topic? Because Lee Anderson's point, I think, would be that he wanted to get a conversation going about this, and that he has most certainly achieved.
He has started a conversation around the issue, but it's a very, very specific minority issue. And an MP suggesting in Parliament, which is also factually incorrect, that there isn't a great need for them and then it's a generation-to-generation problem in that context, just isn't accurate. And I think food banks shouldn't be a kind of integrated into the state in terms that people are relying on them in place of government support. It should be a source of national shame that, that this is the situation.
Sebastian Payne, have you got a slightly different take on that?
Well, I think the point that Lee Anderson was trying to get, and I think, no one's saying food banks are a wonderful thing, the fact that they've grown so much in the past decade. And there was a picture on social media of a new food bank being opened, I think, in
Dartford.
In Dartford, in
Ribbon
Kent.
cutting.
Exactly. And that created a whole fury over this. And on the one hand, the people who've opened that are obviously delighted because they're doing something for their community. They are trying to help. And the fact they were smiling received a huge amount of backlash there. And of course, the story on food banks is obviously nuanced. They do an awful lot of good for their communities. Now, I remember David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, was photographed in front of a food bank in his constituency, which again resulted in a backlash. And I think you've just got to take a sort of centre ground view on this, which is that, yes, it's not a good thing that they have necessarily grown to the extent they have, but they can do very good things within their community. And those who create them and are there for them, that's a good thing. And we should welcome that